Hare Krishna, a big welcome to all of you. Today in our presence, we have His Holiness Bhakti Bhanu Swami. Most of you know him, but some of you are new here. So I'd like to give you a short introduction. His Holiness Bhanu Swami is of Japanese origin but was born in Canada. He joined the Hare Krishna movement in India in 1970, and after 6 months, he finally met his spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, who was about to set on his India tour with his Western disciples. So Maharaj joined the team, and after traveling and preaching in different places in India, went to Kumbh Mela, the famous Kumbh Mela which is going on, in 1971, and got initiated in Kumbh Mela by Srila Prabhupada. Maharaj took his sannyas vows in 1984, and Bhanu Swami is personally instructed in the art of deity worship by Srila Prabhupada. And within Iskcon, he is an authority on the topic. Maharaj is an authority on many topics. Bhanu Swami has been GBC member since 2003. Zonal assignments cover South India, Japan, Malaysia, Australia. He is a trustee for Australia. So it is by his blessing we are having this wonderful place here. And he is a scholar in Sanskrit and Bengali and has translated many significant works of the Gaudiya Vaishnava canon. Bhanu Swami is a quiet achiever and has studied a variety of disciplines, including martial arts, Reiki healing, Carnatic music, specifically Veena. He is a reputed astrologer, so as soon as he finishes the class, don't come rushing with your hands, please don't do that. And Bhanu's depth of scholarship has enabled him to create presentations on topics like karma, reincarnation, yoga, and the intricacies of the sacred books like Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Maharaj explains very complex historic subjects in an easy, palatable manner, and enlivening the audience with spiritual intellectualism. Today's topic is also a very interesting topic. So without much ado, we can only speak about Maharaj stories and we can't hear him. And so, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Vishnu-Padaya, Krishna-Prasthaya, Bhuvade, Shrimate, Bhaktivedanta Swami, Namaste, Saraswati, Gauravani Pracharane, Nirvishesha, Shuddhavadi, Pastachadesha Charane, Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Padmanjananda, Sri Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare. Everybody is interested in knowledge, and in the modern world, that is stressed, but just stressed in a rather formal way. You have to go to school, you have to graduate, you have to go to college or university, and you have to go to a good college or university, and then you get a job or whatever. So knowledge is basically something you do in order to make money. But nevertheless, knowledge gets some sort of respect in the modern world, but it is also a little bit distorted. And we shouldn't think that this type of knowledge that we get is the only type of knowledge, or that it's the most valuable also. And so simply because we got a MS or a PhD or whatever, that doesn't mean that we are fully equipped to handle this material world with our knowledge. So in ancient India, they developed knowledge. After thousands of years, India got conquered by the British, etc. But then Indians began to think, oh, we should abandon our knowledge, which is old-fashioned, and we should adopt Western knowledge. And then they established universities in Calcutta and other places in India, made degrees like that. And so the young people of India thought that knowledge meant Western knowledge, specifically scientific knowledge. And then the whole goal was to get that type of knowledge. And in fact,
most Indians would study in India, and then come to get more knowledge, so they would run off to America or Europe or something to get a more prestigious degree. And even now, a lot of Indians, they leave India, they go get a degree in Australia or Adelaide University Center, he said, or Melbourne or something like that, and then you got that degree and you consider that more knowledge. So in one sense, yes, there's good knowledge, but we should understand that there's another type of knowledge, and it's actually a greater knowledge. And that greater knowledge started in India. So India has a great tradition of knowledge, which consequently, with modern education, was rejected in favor of Western knowledge. But that has been present in India since time immemorial. It started with the Vedas 5,000 years ago. And of course, we don't find it present in India now, except through a few monuments, that is, stone monuments that have resisted time, and they're still around, so they last for 1,000 years or whatever, whereas wood buildings crumble away. So we got a few monuments there, and even these monuments show the impressiveness of the ancient culture of India. And of course, this is not even the oldest. These are things maybe 1,000 years or 500 years old. But even then, they are remarkable creations. But there's things older than that we don't even have. But throughout India, we have some remnants of that culture recorded in stone. Of course, most of these things you see are temples. So that's because they built the temples out of stone. They might now build the other buildings out of stone, and so they all disappeared. So all we got is a few temples left of that. And a lot of these got destroyed also by soldiers and wars and whatever like that. So we've got a few things left. So we got a few remnants, visible remnants in the modern world, like east, west, north, south India. Apart from that, in the temples, we should understand that even physically speaking, India was very wealthy. It was so wealthy that Europe was dreaming of coming to India to take the wealth because they weren't as wealthy. And so India had a lot of wealth. Finally, the British conquered India, and they took away all the wealth. So why did Britain become so powerful? Because it took all the wealth of India. So India was very wealthy, physically speaking, in terms of minerals and gold and things like that. They had huge jewels, huge rubies, huge sapphires, emeralds, diamonds, gold, all these things. Quite in abundance. How close do I have to get? So they get too close, maybe too loud. Around the world, we'll find there many jewels. You see here the King of England's crown, and that's got a big diamond on top. That came from India. Taken from one of the temples of India. Someone took it out of the temple and ended up in India, in Britain, like that. Around the world. I think one of these is in Russia. The Tsar of Russia was like the king of Russia, had a big staff, and one that was a big diamond. This is one of the diamonds from India sitting on his thing. So India had lots of jewels. In fact, if you look in Wikipedia or something for famous diamonds, most of the famous diamonds came from India before they discovered diamonds in South Africa. So South Africa is now a big producer, but before that, the biggest diamonds came from India. But there's this jewel wealth or whatever like that. And so physically, India had a lot of wealth long, long ago. And even Columbus was trying to get to India. And he discovered America. He was trying to get to India. Why? Because of the wealth of India. But that's only like 600 years ago or something like that. But previous to that, much more wealth. And if we look at Srimad Bhagavatam, we'll see them very, very wealthy. 500 years ago even, when the first Europeans came, this is actually Hampi, which was the Vijayanagar Empire, now in Carnatic State, northern Carnatic State, like that. A very, very wealthy kingdom. Krishnadeva Rai was the king at that time, very, very powerful king. And the first Europeans who came, they were welcomed by him and put in the guest house. And those explorers that came were rather shocked because they were put in rooms covered in gold. And that was the guest room, all gold walls. And there is this was the marketplace. So in the marketplace, generally you'll find, bananas and oranges and grapes and sugarcane and rice and whatever like that. This market was special. It was all gems. Basketfuls of rubies, basketfuls of diamonds, basketfuls of, things. Something like you see in maybe a modern, they have a gem show like in Hong Kong, and all the jewelers get there and they display all their, piles of jewels like that. So this was there in the open. It was the open market, the jewel market, with all these piles of jewels everywhere. And they were shocked, these Europeans. They'd never seen such wealth before. This was just one part of India, one kingdom. He didn't even conquer the whole of India, just South India, a little bit of South India, because it's so wealthy, this one kingdom. Of course, after that, it all disappeared. Very quickly, it all disappeared. Nobody knows where all that wealth went, but it was there at one time. So that's only like 600 years ago, 500 years ago. This time of Lord Chaitanya, actually. And this wealth was still there. But apart from physical wealth, India had advanced in education. So even in 700 BC, there was a huge university at Takshila in North India at that time. Huge university, so many buildings. So they were cultivating knowledge, not just spiritual knowledge, material knowledge, and everything, all sorts of knowledge at a very early stage. We know that Ayurveda is very ancient. Of course, we say it comes from Dhanvantari, so it's actually eternal. Dhanvantari is an avatar of the Lord, but a few thousand years ago, it was put into medical textbooks. So we have Charaka and Sushruta, and they were the first persons who wrote authoritative Ayurvedic texts, largely based on herbs and things like that. There are other systems of medicine. The Egyptians had medicine, the Greeks had medicine, whatever like this. Those systems are no longer, we don't have the knowledge. This system has continued for thousands of years. And we still have Ayurvedic colleges, Ayurvedic doctors graduating from the colleges, practicing, even today, using the same text for thousands of years. But this is something remarkable. There's no other system of medicine that's continued like that. Maybe the Chinese medicine is 1,000 years old or something like that. But this is like 2,500 years ago. Same text. People still study. Of course, you can say, well, this is all ancient and, fabricated or whatever, imaginary. Well, they continued to use it because it worked for thousands of years. And it was not just herbs, mixing herbs and putting them in pots and boiling them or whatever. They also did surgery. So Sushruta was considered the father of surgery. Actually operated on people and did things like that. So it was not just herbs. It was practical surgery for people who got wounded in battle, etc. So medicine was very advanced in ancient India, long before other countries. Greek, to some degree, and Egypt had some sort of medicine or whatever, but then they also made a lot of mistakes. And those mistakes continued and were adopted by the Christians. And so up until the medical revolution, probably about 600 years ago or 500 years ago in Europe, they finally discovered that the Greek texts were wrong. They made mistakes of where the heart was or where the liver was. They didn't know where it was, and it was all in the wrong place. When they opened up a body, it was different. So, they had misinformation also. So, this system has continued for thousands of years, long before any other medicine, practical medicine was used in the world. So, we could say in science they were very advanced. In terms of language, very advanced. We have different types of languages, also some modern theories of language and how there's some genes in your brain or your chromosomes that determine language, etc. like that. But of all languages, this is a very interesting language, Sanskrit. A very, very interesting language. And in fact, even the Western scholars, when they started studying linguistics and language, they said there's an Indo-European language, which before Sanskrit, and that spread or turned into all the languages, most of the languages in Europe. They all emanated from that. There's a few languages in Asia and stuff that are not related at all, but most of the European languages also spread under this Indo-European language, which Sanskrit is one of the basic roots of. So it's a language that gave rise to many, many languages, most of the languages of Europe actually. But the surprising thing is that this is the ancient languages. Again, the Rig Veda is, modern scholars will say, is 5,000 years old. Of course we say it's eternal, but the modern scholars say 5,000 years ago, Rig Veda was preserved at that time. It's a very interesting language because it's more or less complete. It has all the sounds, it's not all sounds, but all the common sounds you make with your throat and your mouth and your nose, but all there in the alphabet, so to speak. Whereas some languages like Tamil don't have all the things. They don't have all the sounds. English does not have all the sounds. European languages, most of them don't have all the sounds. But Sanskrit has all these sounds very methodically laid out. And not only that, the grammar is such that it can be used in all sorts of ways. So you can use it for science. So they could write mathematical treatises, astronomical treatises, like that, scientific things, very precise. And they can also write poetry, great poetry, creative things, descriptive things. So it was a very, very flexible language. That's why probably English language is very flexible also. You can do most of the things they do all in the English language, all the scientific things, because it's very easy for that. And it's used to express things. So very, very useful language. But in ancient times, Sanskrit was very, very precise in doing all this. So ancient language. Now the thing is, ancient language, there's so many ancient languages, Greek, Latin, before that, what is this, Etruscan or something, and Egyptian, and so many languages are there. None of them survived. But Sanskrit survived. And even 500 years ago, people were speaking Sanskrit. In the courts, the king's courts, they all speak Sanskrit. So it's only after that it became a little bit. But even now, it's studied. So the language has come down 5,000 years. No other language in the world like that is preserved for so long. So, because of the nature of that language, Sanskrit, which has all the sounds and so on, Panini, who wrote the first grammar, very famous grammar, kind of a complete grammar to analyze all of the rules of Sanskrit language. He also was a linguist, and he was interested in analyzing where all the sounds came from, some from the throat, some from the tongue, some from the teeth, some from the nasal, whatever like this. So he analyzed all the sounds, so he was the first linguist in the world, 4th century BC, whereas the linguists came up probably 18th century, 19th century in Europe or something like that. So very ancient times, they were interested in how the human beings communicate with sound. So this is all, of course, material knowledge. Another area is mathematics and astronomy. So India was very renowned for their mathematical knowledge and astronomical observation. Even today you'll see these structures. There's one in Adelaide itself, and one in Jaipur, I think, one in Varanasi. These astronomical things that they would use to observe and write down the positions of planets against the stars on a daily basis, so they can make predictions on corrections on the formulas for their planetary movements, etc. So in ancient India, like most cultures of the world, they were interested in astronomy. And you can trace it back to Egypt and Greek, and of course in America you get the Mayans and all these other cultures, and North American cultures also, even Africa. They're all looking at the sky all the time. And it's very complex because nothing moves regularly. It's not like sun, it goes every month, like this one sign, and the moon also quite regular. All the other planets are very irregular. Sometimes fast, sometimes slow, sometimes going backwards, sometimes going forward. So there's very complicated formulas that you have to derive by observing the sky for 100 years or so. Then you can make some formulas, to predict where it's going to be on so-and-so date in the future. So it requires great observation. That's why they had all these observatories to observe over time. Then they make theories that are formulas. And these formulas are very complex. They involve trigonometry and things like that. Very, very complex things for the movements of planets. So India became very advanced in astronomy and consequently mathematics. And they developed a large group of things. Even the numbers come from Brahmi script, whatever like that. So we get the 10 base type of numbers coming from India itself, which is very useful for calculation. Zero. That innocent little thing called zero was invented in India also, and very useful. We see that there's calculations in the Bhagavatam on one day of Brahma, which is a huge number with 0, 0, 0, 0, 0 after it. It's very difficult. You make calculations if you don't have that zero there. You have other number systems. It's very, very difficult. And not only you have one day of Brahma, you get a lifetime of Brahma, 100 years, and you get huge numbers calculated in Vedic cosmology, which is much bigger than any numbers in any other culture. Huge numbers. Anyway, the zero was attributed to Aryabhata, very famous mathematician. He also looked at the sky, and he also explained eclipses like we do today, with the shadow of the Earth upon the moon, etc., like that, or the moon coming in front of the sun. So he explained things like this also, which was maybe 1,500 years before Galileo in Europe made the same conclusion. And he also even had the idea that the Earth was actually spherical. It wasn't flat. It was spherical going around like this. Long before a few thousand years before they discovered that in the West. Bhaskaracharya was later, 1280, but he had a lot of differential calculus, trigonometry he was studying in college now. That was all his invention long before, a few hundred years before Newton developed similar types of calculations. So, India was very advanced in material knowledge in various spheres. Not only this, we say agriculture, things like this, water systems, all these things, city planning, all these things were highly developed in ancient India. But, of course, India is very famous for the spiritual knowledge. So when we talk about knowledge in ancient India, we talk about Veda. Veda means knowledge, but of course it means material knowledge, like astronomy and all these things, but it also means this spiritual knowledge. And this, of course, is famous around the world. They don't quite accept the material aspect, because India was very primitive in terms of material knowledge. Okay, they're good spiritually. So they kind of accept the spiritual knowledge in one way or another. If we look at that knowledge, it also was quite exceptional. We do have spiritual knowledge around the world. The Greeks had their idea about, demigods and things like this. Romans had ideas, Egyptians had demigods and whatever. And then we get Christianity and Judaism and Islam and Buddhism and so many different religions around the world. India is kind of famous because we got a lot of scriptures, more than all the other groups. And we have also got the oldest scriptures. Of course, there are some scriptures, like the Avesta, I think, upon which Zoroastrianism and then consequently the Parsis, their religion comes about 5,000 years ago also, ancient Persian language or whatever. And then we have the Vedas, 5,000 years. But this, of course, modern dating or whatever. So Rig Veda, 5,000 years. So this puts it very ancient. 3,000 years before the Bible. 2,400 years before the Torah, or the Jewish thing. And maybe 4,000 years before the Quran. So very ancient scripture. Of course, old is the best, always the best, but not only is it oldest, but it was preserved. We do have, I said, the ancient Persian scriptures and a few other things like that, but nobody really understands or reads those things nowadays. Still, the Vedas are intact, like Ayurveda coming down for thousands of years. Vedas have been passed down for thousands of years also, and intact today also. And still people chant them and read them. So very astonishing. It's come down all this time, passed down. Everything else is deteriorated or whatever. Even the Bible. Bible, okay, after Christ sometime, the Bible was formed. But actually changed so much after that. After a few hundred years, the things were added, Gospels were added, and then, of course, they kept changing and changing it. So it's not really the original at all. But actually, we do have the original, you know, the Rig Veda is there, and whatever, the Vedas are there, and they're passed down intact. So very, very remarkable for that. Another thing, of course, is they're huge. Bibles don't look like this. Each Veda is huge. We have 4 Vedas. Each is huge. And each Veda has parts to it. We have the Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sam Veda, Atharva Veda. But each Veda has parts to it. We have 4 parts to each Veda. So the Rig Veda will have Brahmana section, Aranyaka section, Upanishad section, and Samhita section. They're very huge. Just to learn one Veda is a big task. And it deals with, it's interesting because it doesn't cater to one interest. For people who are interested in staying in the material world, okay, stay in the material world, do what you want, but you follow these rules. So this is the Karma Kanda section. Want to stay in the material world and enjoy the material world, fine. Do it, but follow some rules. So that's the Karma Kanda. The Gyan Kanda, Upanishads, we call Uttaramimamsa, the final conclusion, or later conclusion, is get out of the material world. Material world is miserable, get out, get liberation from the material world. So that's another section. So people who want to stay in the material world, Veda gives you some rules for that, and if you want to get out, gives you different rules. And we have Upasana Kanda, which is worship. Upasana means worship. So these are the prayers, or the hymns, the rigs, the praising Vishnu, Shiva, other deities. So very big. But as well as that, as well as the Vedas, we do have other things. We have Puranas, Smritis, etc. So a huge number of works. One group is called Itihasas, or histories, which includes Mahabharata and Ramayana. So everybody in India knows these works. They're very famous. And they also know the stories because they've been passed down thousands of years again, thousands of years, and it's still popular today. And of course, in the Mahabharata, we have Bhagavad Gita, which is a summary of the Upanishadic teachings. And we have the Ramayana again. So both Mahabharata and Ramayana became very famous not only in India, it spread. So that you'll get even in China, the influence of we get Hanuman, the monkey king, the whole story of the monkey king in China. And of course in Thailand, you get the whole Rama Leela there. Also in Indonesia, Rama, very famous there. So it spread, the whole, these ancient literature spread all over Southeast Asia as well, and China. So India has an ancient culture with a lot of knowledge. There's the spiritual knowledge, which everybody kind of accepts, and they also have the material knowledge, which people don't know about so much, but very advanced at that time. In the modern world, we do have knowledge, and we have colleges, universities, etc., but it is basically material knowledge. Right? They do have arts and sciences. I guess that's the main division in universities. But for Indians, if you want to do anything, you don't do arts. you do the sciences, you do engineering, and all these sort of things, because it's the only way you can make a living, or whatever like that. So the arts are things like philosophy and languages and fine arts and all things like that. But anyway, so basically, knowledge in the modern world means material knowledge. That's all. Which it's not neglected, because like ancient India, they also have material knowledge. Because you need material knowledge to support your society. It's necessary. That's there. But in the modern world, this is overemphasized. And if you talk about spiritual knowledge, then people say it's all like, sentimental or whatever. We're not going to deal with that sort of thing. The best they can do have religious studies. They'll have universal religious studies, and they'll compare the different religions of the world. That's all they do. Okay. But we see in India, the Vedic knowledge had both aspects. It didn't reject the material, but it also didn't reject the spiritual. So same person could be both. Okay? So we have these, Bhaskaracharya or Aryabhata. They were Brahmins. They studied the Vedas. So they knew all spiritual knowledge, but they were doing mathematics, all this stuff. So they were both. And they didn't reject anything. In the modern world, this is knowledge. Everything else is kind of secondary. And if you do that, it's a little bit, it's contrary to your material knowledge. In India, it wasn't really contrary. They were able to accept both things without contradiction. So very, very interesting. We can explain this a little bit. This is one way, not only way to explain it, but one way. Because you have two brains. Usually we think of one brain, but if you get a brain surgeon or someone, they open up your skull and take the brain out. It's actually two brains, almost completely separate. The little joint on the body, they actually can separate them like this. And they act differently. They have completely different functions. The two different personalities, left brain, right brain. So here the diagram is left brain is all the gray matter with little boxes, and people in the little boxes like probably typing in their computers. This is the logical brain, which is necessary for survival. We have to, make sense of daily things and whatever, memorize things and do that. And of course, this is what I think modern Indian education is all like that. The kids in school from the 2 years old and 3 years old, they start learning logical things and languages and words and numbers and it's like that. And they have to memorize all these things all the way up to college. It's all this logical type of stuff. That's the left brain. The other is the right brain. The right brain has no compartments. It's open fields and trees and whatever. You can fly kites and do whatever you want. So this is the creative or the intuitive brain, the right brain. So we have these two brains in us. And of course, both are necessary for our functioning. And if we want to be balanced, we should balance both. But unfortunately, we start putting all the emphasis on the left brain in the modern world. So we can say in ancient India, they had both sides kind of balanced nicely. But as we get into modern world with the Renaissance and modern scientific revolution in Europe, we tend to emphasize the left brain more and more. And so that's problematic. So the right brain is intuitive, thinks not of individual things in analysis, it tries to think of the whole and how the whole thing operates. So it's more or less multi-dimensional. It doesn't restrict itself to looking in 3 dimensions or anything like that. It's more like a yogi going out of his body and seeing the world in a completely different way, not in terms of our 3-dimensional analysis. Left brain, very logical, very practical. It likes to analyze everything into parts and find causes and effects, etc. like that. It limits itself to 3 dimensions that we can deal with. Like that. So, the left brain, unfortunately, when it does this, it limits our identity. In terms of the Bhagavad Gita analysis, it could say that we get stuck in our ahamkara, a limited identity. I am so-and-so person, so-and-so place, so-and-so time, and this is what I'm doing, and like this. We limit our possibilities and our identity. Consequently, we become completely isolated from the rest of the world. And therefore, we have to compete with everybody else in this world, and we get all stressed out. Then we get emotional problems, and we get erratic behavior, and anger, and fear, whatever, get depression, all sorts of things. So we overemphasize the left brain and all of this logical stuff. It's a very unbalanced state, and we can end up with a lot of problems, physical, mental problems like that. And of course, we should try to balance the two. If we don't, we end up in a state of anxiety. Complete anxiety and stress, which is not good for us mentally and physically. So, this is one way of analyzing the modern world, that we overemphasize the left brain or whatever, we don't balance things out properly. This is one way of analyzing, but if we go to the Vedic literature, they don't even talk about the brain at all. There's no brain mentioned. And we get a whole analysis of senses, and sense objects, and mind, intelligence, false ego, all of these things, body, organs of the body, no brain. Not mentioned anywhere. They're very insignificant. So, brain, of course, is there. You can analyze it here. But in Vedic literature, there's the subtle body, Sukshma Sarir, with the mind, intelligence, false ego, which you can't even see. So it's not exactly the brain. The brain, we say, is the dull, gross representation of your subtle body. So that subtle body is also there. That's not even taken into account in modern medicine, or psychology or psychiatry, whatever. It's there though. And of course, more important than that, behind that is the particle of consciousness, which makes the subtle body and the gross body operate. That's the Atma, or the Jiva. And behind that is the Supreme Lord. So all of these levels, of course, are beyond modern science completely. They don't even think about this. Yeah. So this is the body that we deal with. This is you at the present time in terms of modern medicine, psychology, or whatever. That's all you are. But if we look at Vedic literature, no, you got another body. You got so many bodies that are also real, and they're stuck interrelated and stuck and overlapping and expanding from this body. Mind, intelligence, false ego, subtle senses, etc. And behind that, you got the Atma. All very important. And of course, more important than anything is the Atma. So, modern science is dealing with, okay, we'll correct your physical body. We do modern medicine and stuff like that. It's only dealing with that body. Ayurveda will recognize at least you've got the subtle body, and if we give you the Ayurvedic medicine, it's going to affect your subtle body as well. Of course, modern medicine is also going to affect your subtle body, but they don't know about it. It's killing your subtle body when it's trying to cure your gross body. So they give you some medicine, and we end up with worse problems because your subtle body gets so upset. So anyway, the Vedic herbs, the Ayurvedic, that they give things which will actually help both bodies, subtle body and gross body. So you get a better cure that way. So that's the idea of Ayurvedic medicine, dealing with not only the gross body but the subtle body. But of course, we also have to think of the Atma behind it. What do we do with the Atma? So that's not really handled by medicine, physical medicine. You can't do that. We have to start spiritual life. That's why spiritual life is important, to deal with the Atma, not all this physical stuff at all. Do that. Okay, going back to the brain, because we're so much stuck into the physical model of our body, that in our brain is the center of our consciousness and our thoughts and whatever. It's very mysterious. People don't really understand the brain now. So some quantum physics are saying, yeah, there is something in there. Consciousness is also somewhere in there, but we don't quite know where it is. There's some microtubules or something, and they get together. Consciousness is somewhere in there. They don't really know. One thing is the pineal gland. They know it's there. The pineal gland is there somewhere in the brain. Looks like a little pine cone. Very mysterious thing, and it secretes some hormones and whatever like that. And it's there in the fetus, in the womb, it's there. And it's there when you die, it's there all the way through it. They don't quite know what it's for. But the speculation is that this is the one that can actually stimulate the spiritual life. So of course it's a gross representation of something which stimulates your spiritual life. Obviously it's the Atma itself, which is a spiritual thing, but we could say the pituitary gland and the pineal gland or whatever inside the brain, they are somehow connected with this. So the theory is that somehow by stimulating this pineal gland, you can actually activate and make a balance between the right brain and the left brain. So you can actually function properly in this material world. Then you can get higher levels of perception, subtle perception, etc., and ultimately spiritual perception. How do we do this? How do we stimulate that pineal gland and pituitary gland? Meditational process. Chanting the name of the Lord. So this is going to stimulate that. So you get your higher perception. Balance like your left brain and right brain, get higher perception, and then finally you realize Supreme Lord. So, the Vedic literature, like Bhagavad Gita, they will give us this process, how to cultivate spiritual life. As the material life is not neglected, but we do have to take care of the Atma, which is behind the whole gross body and the subtle body. We have to somehow get the Atma activated. So we do that by process of bhakti yoga. Oh, okay, just a little bit here. Oh. Okay, so Prabhupada calls this a spiritual science. No, science, of course, that's not a science, it's all like, religion, whatever like that. But we say it's scientific. We can say that instead of using the word science, we could say it is reasonable. It's a reasonable proposition. Okay, everybody says, my religion is reasonable, like that. But we can say it's more reasonable. So, we know that all religions have conflicts, and we have wars over religion, etc., like that. If we look at the basic concepts, then we can discover there is some common principles. So these common principles are accepted in the Vedic literature. But then, it's also unique contribution. Things that the Vedas say that enlarge our knowledge beyond this common concepts. So, of course, major religions in the world say, okay, there is a God, and there's one God. No, accept that. But then, what about God? Who is that God? Then we said, God is called this, God is called that, whatever. We could go to different names. So, in the Bhagavatam, it explains, we have God, and he takes different forms. He is Brahman, God without a form, without qualities, without activities. That's what some people will claim, and it's also correct. One God. One God again, who actually creates the material world. So he has a little bit of activity, he has a form, he witnesses all the actions. This is God, Paramatma. So some people will say, yes, God is the creator. Okay, we accept that also. He's the witness, he knows everything. Third conception of God, God is Bhagavan. He's all the other things, Brahman, Paramatma, but he has form, qualities, and activities which are spiritual and most attractive. So God is all of these things. Most religions, we can fit somewhere in the beginning. Most religions say God has no form, something more like Brahman. You can't have a form of God. Some will say, well, almost a form. At least he does some activity, creates the material world. So they're getting more or less a little bit like Paramatma. But they don't actually say he has a form. But he creates the world, at least. And he witnesses everything. So most religions fall within this impersonal or slightly personal aspect, but without a form. Vedic literature says, okay, it's acceptable. It's also part of God. One God is there. These are parts of ways of seeing God. But the most complete vision of God is God with a form, qualities, activities, and you can worship above. That's the highest concept, Bhagavan. So we get three concepts of God, all acceptable. But nevertheless, not all equal. Because the more knowledge you have of God, the more complete it is. Yeah. So acceptable, but as we have more complete form, less complete form. Yeah. So God is one, but you can have all these different forms, whatever. So most religions got a problem dealing with God as a form, and not God as a form. They say, oh, God has no form, whatever. We really struggle with that. God has a form, not too many people are going to agree, but the Vaishnavas will agree with it. In the Vedas, of course, we have two groups. The Mayavadis that follow the Shankar, no form of God. So they're very much akin to Christian and Muslim. They don't want a form of God. So the Vaishnavas say, no, yes, that's there, but it's not the only thing. God also has a form as Bhagavan. So that's rare. Not so many people understand this or accept this, but it's more complete. So God has a form. Once God has a form, which is spiritual, not material, he's not limited. He can have many forms. So not only God has a form, you know, many forms. So we got God is a turtle, kurma. God is a fish, the matsya. God is Bor avatar, Varaha. God is a dwarf. God is Parsuram, a warrior. God is Rama, king. God is Krishna. God could be black. God could be white. God could be gold. God could be red. God could be green. All different colors. God knows. Okay. So, but all spiritual, not material. Okay. So why? Because God can be, He's infinite. He has infinite power. He can take all sorts of forms. And in all these forms, spiritual, in all these forms, most attractive and beautiful, in all these forms, He can give bliss to the devotees. So, as I said, most religions struggle with the idea that God has a form, but still they want to give a form to God. So, in the Sistine Chapel, God has a form. Well, what's the form? Old man. How can God be old? Of course, we say God is Purana. He's also old in one sense because He's eternal. But actually, He's eternally young. He is never going up. He is ever fresh. He's oldest, eternal, but He's ever young. He doesn't grow old at all. So, what does God do? God, everything, God exists. God is Allah, God is Jehovah, whatever. God is a name. What does He do? He has no form. What does He do? Can't really answer. Vedic literature, no, God has a form and He has so many activities. So His activities we call Leela. And He has so many different pastimes. So Ramayana, Mahabharata, Bhagavatam describe the Leela of God. So many different activities, multifarious activities of God. So many activities, all very attractive. So, more complete, basically more complete. So they give us forms of God in detail and activities of God. Most religions, other religions, think of God as someone who is very fearful and a punisher, like Yamaraj. Because everyone is sinful, you get punished. But contrary to that, we have God as the object of love, who gives love. So this is the principle of bhakti. Bhakti means devotion. We show devotion to God. God has devotion for us. He has love for us. So this is a very, very, you could say, reciprocal relationship between God and human. Expressed, of course, by Krishna. And so Krishna has love for Mother Yasoda. Mother Yasoda has love for Krishna. Radha has love for Krishna. Krishna has love for Radha. Very intimate type of love. So of course, religions also speak of love of God, etc., but it's not well defined. But we do have very definite loving relationships in devotion. So you can love God, as here, Radha Krishna, who we call Madhurya Rasa. You can love God as Mother Yasoda loves Krishna, as a parent, which is kind of unheard of in other religions. How can you take God and bathe Him and feed Him and punish Him and whatever like that? But that happens. Mother Yasoda is punishing Krishna. God is a friend. Krishna playing with the copper boys, joking with them, playing games with them. But God is master, you're the servant, Dasirasa. So we have all types of relationships of love, which are not explained anywhere in any other literatures. But in the Vedic literature we'll find that. So we got a very, very complete description of God. As for us, the problem of suffering comes. Why do we suffer? We suffer. God's in control. Why does He make us suffer? He makes us suffer, then He's not so merciful after all. Doesn't care for us. If He doesn't care for us, He's not perfect. He's not perfect, He can't be God. That's the conclusion. So there's always a doubt in religion. All religions have to answer this question, and they don't quite succeed. Vedic literature answers the question. The suffering is not God causing the suffering, us causing the suffering. We suffer because of karma. Karma is our own actions. We are responsible for our actions. We create our suffering, not God. But we can also get out of that suffering by surrendering to God. So that way God is not responsible for our suffering. He is responsible for taking us out of the suffering if we surrender to Him. So, are we condemned to ever, when we die, what happens? So, if you don't surrender in this lifetime, you go to hell forever, whatever. So, no. Birth after birth after birth, we go on. If you don't make it in this lifetime, you get another chance. And another chance, and another chance, life after life. And hopefully, in one of these lifetimes, you take the bhakti, and you surrender to God, and then you get out of the material world completely. So we don't have to keep revolving like this at all. So, another point is that, of course, maybe we overemphasize, okay, surrender to Krishna, only Krishna, don't worship anybody else, and it looks a little fanatical. But actually the Vedas are very liberal. As I say, there's Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan, they're all part of God. So we accept in one sense all these different worships. And different paths. So, as we see, we have Karma Kanda and Karma Yoga, so they accept if you want to stay in the material, okay, we're not going to force you to get out. We'll encourage you to stay there, but at least you follow Dharma, follow the rules of Varnashram, follow some regulations, don't commit sinful activities like this. So we have a system there too. If you want to stay in the material, you can do it, but you do it in such a way that you avoid sinful activity, and therefore you get more enjoyment and less suffering. So, not just one path, we have that path. Then we have the path if you want to get Brahman, fine. You get liberation from the material world, you practice Jnana Yoga or Sangha Yoga. You can do that. But if you want to realize Bhagavan, fine, you practice Bhakti. And then you get realization of Krishna. So different paths for different people, not one path for everybody. So we have Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Asanga Yoga, and we get Bhakti Yoga. However, in Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna says, yes, chapter 3 recommends Karma Yoga, chapter 4, Jnana Yoga, chapter 6, Asanga Yoga, and chapter 7 through 12, Bhakti Yoga, chapter 18, Bhakti Yoga, and then he says, don't do anything else, just do Bhakti Yoga, surrender unto me, forget everything else. So, Krishna's a little fanatical also. So because in Kali Yuga, the other process is not practical for anybody. So only Bhakti Yoga. However, as I said, you need qualifications. If you're not qualified, you can't do Bhakti, you do Karma Yoga better. So the solution to that is, in Kali Yuga, Bhakti Yoga is made very simple. Nam Sankirtan. So from Nam Sankirtan, everybody becomes qualified, everybody can take the process of Bhakti, everyone can realize Bhagavan, they can surpass all these other levels of Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Asanga Yoga, Brahman, Paramatma, and they can realize Bhagavan. So through Nam Sankirtan and the process of Bhakti, we can make this available for everybody in Kali Yuga. So this, of course, is represented in Bhagavad Gita at the end. Of all yogis, the one who worships me with devotion, he is the best of all, he is the best yogi. Okay. Okay, fine. I think that's everything. Hare Krishna. Question? Nothing?
Questions? Just a comment, Maharaj. It's was talking about the father of surgery, Shushkata.
Shushuta,
Yeah, in Melbourne, there's the building of the Royal College of Surgeons.
yeah.
They've kept a statue of Shushkata.
Oh, yes, Shushuta is everybody. Yeah. I heard in Melbourne also that way, and they have to take the history of surgery, and they mention Sushruta in their textbook. Sushruta is the father of surgery. Even in the Western textbook, they mention that. So it's some recognition of Indian ancient science.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. Maharaj, we were having a slide which says meditation percolating down to pituitary gland, the stimulus from there to right brain. And then subtle perception, and finally leading to spiritual perception.
Mm.
When we say meditation in our sampradaya, practice what we do sadhana, say japa, how do we put devotional service other than japa, whatever the services we do in the temple or the preaching, into this part of meditation as such, so that it can percolate down to spiritual perception?
This was just one way of looking at the brain and pituitary and all that, and the pineal gland and the meditation, alpha waves, and all those things like that. So this is one way. Meditation is one way. It's not the only way in which you can, let's say, stimulate your alpha waves or higher realization, whatever. But it's the one that maybe scientists will concentrate on. They look at your brain waves or whatever like that, and they can measure it with meditation processes or whatever like that. So that's one way, and they've done that to some degree. They find that they chant Om or they chant Vedic mantras or whatever, and they can see that it has improvement in the brain functions and whatever, balance, etc. like that. And they found that kirtan also works. So not just meditation, but kirtan itself, chanting. That has a very, very powerful effect. So that part they've got. As for the other process, it's a little bit difficult to measure that. Your daily activities of worshiping deities, it's more difficult to kind of measure in terms of time and results, because there's so many factors involved there. So it has to be measured. But you can find ultimately that it will all help to improve your brain function. That's the first material level. The other is the subtle level, and of course the ultimately is the stimulating jiva, the atma. The whole process of bhakti actually is another, and it's a direct way to stimulate the atma more than the other processes.
Maharaj, percolating down to it, when we say, a famous, some of the sampradaya would say, Yato mat tato pat. And Srila Prabhupada, when he nullified that, saying that the train which can go to Calcutta will not go to Bombay if you take the right one.
Yeah.
But in our discussions, when we are seeing if meditation is not the only train which percolates down to spiritual, and there are various other things, how do we equate the equation?
Yeah, so if we take the recognized, authorized Vedic processes, we'll have Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Astanga Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. All approved, we cannot say they give exactly the same result. They don't. But they're going in the same direction at least. So Karma Yoga takes you one step, up to Sattva Guna. Once you get to Sattva Guna, then you can practice Jnana Yoga or Astanga Yoga. That will take you up to Mukti, liberation, Brahman. But if you want to get to Bhagavan, you have to do Bhakti. So it's like going from Perth to Adelaide, but you actually want to get to Brisbane. So then you have to go to Melbourne and Sydney and then get to Brisbane. So you have to take all the boats. Or you can go directly. You can fly directly from Perth to Brisbane also. So you can do Bhakti and you can go directly also.
I have one question. I have heard that whatever we think at the last breath,
Yes.
at the time
You
of
attain
death,
that.
and we become that.
Yeah.
The true in the Iskcon, but we believe that whatever we think at the last time, we become that. Is that true?
Yeah. Well, this is the statement in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 8. What do you think of when you die, you attain? Of course, there's a little bit of a condition there, because you could say, oh, well, then I'll think of being a millionaire when I die, and then I'll become a millionaire. It may not be so because you got your karma. So, what you think, of course, you could predict, I will think of money when I die, so I'll get money next life. But probably you're not going to think of money at all. You're going to think of something else, because you don't know what you're going to think of when you die. So, one thing is, what you think of is what you're most attached to when you die. You may not be able to control that, what you're going to think of, because you were attached to that. Even if you don't like it, you're going to be attached to that thing. So Bharat Maharaj was attached to this deer when he died. He became a deer. So that's a very graphic example. Puranjana was attached to his wife. He became a woman in his next lifetime. So those are two examples of Bhagavatam. But, as I said, your karma is involved also. So, you could think of money and you could get money, but to be associated with money, but because your karma doesn't allow you to enjoy it, you could just be the cashier of the bank or something like that in your next lifetime. Look at the money, but not enjoy it at all. So you get it. You get that idea of being born with that result, but in a different way than you thought, because your karma is also involved. But the idea there is that what you're going to think of is dependent upon what you do in your life. And what you get attached to or detached from, and what is your goal in life, and whatever. So what you're most attached to, you're most likely going to think of that when you die. So one story is this, I was on the ship, and then the captain said that, I don't know how you got the story, but anyway, he said, yeah, I saw these people in the war, it must have been the Korean War or something there, and he says, the young people, when they're dying, what do they think of? The young soldiers. They all think of their mother.
Mother?
The mother, yeah. Because they're attached to the mother, they didn't get married yet, they just, like that, and they're thinking mother when they die. Because attachment was there. Like that. So, we tend to think of what we're most attached to when we die. Yes.
If a person is very good in Krishna consciousness and they are serious devotee, but not very ideal behavior in their personal life or their personal relationships with their friends or family, but they are good in preaching and a senior devotee, but should we still maintain the association with them?
With the relatives. Should they maintain a relationship with their relatives and parents or something?
No, like others, like outsiders, like friends or other devotees, their behavior is not ideal, but...
Yeah, well, it depends on the situation. We say that whatever is favorable for your bhakti, you accept. Whatever is unfavorable, you reject. But then, especially for new devotees, they may be a little bit prejudiced and think everybody is, they're all Maya, let's reject everybody, whatever, and they get a little fanatical. But we shouldn't be so fanatical. We should be very tolerant of all the people around us. And of course, you respect your friends and your relatives and your parents and whatever like that. That should always be there. At the same time, it may not be so favorable for your devotion. So you have to tolerate those situations as much as possible. And meanwhile, you try to do as much devotion as you can. Okay. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
His Holiness Bhanu Swami Maharaj Ki
Jai.
Kirtan, Adelaide. Leave a like and subscribe.